What's up, John Sonmez from simpleprogrammer.com. I'm here in Italy in the Tuscany region, and I'm recording some videos, taking a catch-up day and getting some work done so that I can be caught up, answering some emails, all that fun stuff here. So I got this question, sort of like a couple of questions here that I thought was interesting from one of my favorite emailers who asked me a lot of questions. It comes up with a lot of good video ideas here. And he said, dishonesty changes who you are. It's interesting. This is a concept I talked about a little bit when I did this video on the ends justifying the means, okay? In Switzerland, at the top of that mountain. All right, and he says here, being dishonest may make you some money, but what does it do to you as a person? How does it change your personality? What does practicing immorality change you as a person? And I'll have to nitpick the phrasing a little bit here. I'm not sure I like the term immorality. I used to like that term. I don't like that term anymore. I'm not sure I totally believe in that term in particular, because you know that infers that there's a set of morals that we all have to subscribe to. And you know, I think if you study philosophy, if you look through history, you'll find that might is right. You'll find that morality is often determined by the more powerful, that force and strength and might defines morality, except except for when you have society. Then it becomes the might of the society, and then as the political organizations increase in size, it becomes the might of whatever that is. The might of the world, the might of the human race is what determines morality. So, you know, what's good for the individual is not necessarily good for the group. What's good for the group is not good for the other groups. It doesn't play well in the community, and so we sort of see this this change in the context of morality. With that said, I think principles in morality are different things. I think principles are universal. I don't think that, and I think some of it overlaps, right? But I just think that when we say, you know, someone's being immoral, is it because they said fuck? Is it because they stuck their genitals where they shouldn't have? Is it because they wore inappropriate clothing? Is it because they didn't follow a law, a rule that someone told them that they needed to follow, right? Or is it because they did something that in the balance of nature is going to cause a karmatic disruption that's going to bite them in the ass, right? Something they've upset equilibrium. And I think that laws, this is where principles come in, is I think that when you violate certain principles, it's just like it's a faceless, nameless law. It doesn't care about you. It's not out to hurt you. There's no vengeance or justice happening here. It's just the way things work, just like gravity does, right? I mean, you throw a fucking ball out the window, it's going to drop to the ground. You jump off of the roof, you're going to fall to the fucking ground. There's no, like, gravity isn't mad at you. You haven't sinned against gravity and now you're going to pay the price for that. Same thing with principles, I think. You know, again, I'm not suggesting to be corrupt and immoral. In fact, I'm suggesting the opposite. In fact, in most of these videos, one of the things I tell you, right, I did this video on porn and masturbation. I did this video on addiction and drugs. You know, I've done some videos on those type of topics. And I've never come at you from a moralistic viewpoint. I've never said, hey, this is wrong because God says so or whatever, because whether I believe that or not, it doesn't matter. That doesn't help you any, right? I've always come at it from this pragmatic kind of practical viewpoint, saying like, if you do this, this is the result that you'll get. And it's not a punishment, it's not a sin, it's not a, you know, type of vengeance type of thing. It's just, this is what will happen. If you use a crutch, you'll be weak. There you go, right? I mean, that's how it is. If you don't develop your own internal strength, then you won't have your own internal strength, and more things are going to crush you, right? I mean, these are like basic kind of things, right? If you spend your time doing something that wastes your time, you'll have less time, so you'll be less productive, so you'll have less whatever you want out of life, right? So it's sort of the same thing here. So I'm actually going to get into the actual question here and talk about dishonesty here. So does being dishonest make you some money, right? But what does it do to you as a person? How does it change your personality? And I think this is one of the interesting things here, is that, again, looking at a principle-based perspective on this, a pragmatic and practical one, not a moralistic and, you know, righteous viewpoint. If you are dishonest, okay, you always know it, right? You always know it. And yes, in the short term, it can make you some money. There's a lot of dishonest ways to make money. I've avoided a lot of those dishonest ways of making money. I can make a lot of money being dishonest. I mean, especially when you know how, right? When you figured it out, right? There's a lot of dishonest ways to make money. I'd rather be in your face and be fucking honest, though, right? I'd rather, because I'd rather play the long game, and I know, right? It's sort of like, I think of this as sort of like the dark side, right? You know, if it's Star Wars, right? If you, the dark side, the dark forces, right? Before they fucked up Star Wars, but you know, in the basic Star Wars, right? If you use the dark force, then it sort of corrupts you, right? You sort of become like Darth Vader or what's his name? Palpatine, the Jedi's. And it messes you up. I mean, you can do good with it, because and there was like these arguments, right? Like, oh well, I'm going to use. I remember playing the Star Wars RPG, and like, oh well, I'm going to use the Dark Force to save this village or whatever, save these people. And I think in the I used to read the novels, right? Like Kevin J. Anderson in the Star Wars novels, and there were always these kind of ethical dilemma of like, should Luke use the Dark Force, figure what it is, to like save someone, right? Save someone's life, to do good. Could I use it to do good? And I think maybe his like student or something did it, and I don't remember. You know, I'm not a huge Star Wars buff, but anyway, I used to be, but until they run it. But the point is, like, when you did that, right, when he would make that choice, right, there's always this, like, you know what it is, like, it's going to cost you some of your soul, right? You're going to be pulled over to the dark side, even though you're trying to use it for good. It's like, you know, it's like the One Ring, right? Lord of the Rings, right? It's like the One Ring. It's like, what was it, Galadriel? It was like, I could do so much good with this, right? Or maybe, you know, Frodo's thinking about what kind of good he could do with it, or whatever it is, but it will corrupt your soul, right? It'll pull you, like, you'll eventually become evil, because once you start being dishonest, you know it. You know you've been dishonest, and you don't trust yourself, right? Because your motives, like, fall into question, right? Like, you can't believe your own words, what you're saying, and so if you're being dishonest with other people, you can't be one way with some people and be one way. You can't be two-faced. What I'm saying is that it's going to fall apart. It's not going to work, right? You start being dishonest to get a little bit ahead, to make some money so you could do some good in the world. And what happens? All of a sudden, you're down this slippery slope. All of a sudden, you no longer trust yourself. When you don't trust yourself, you start to lose your compass. You start to lose, you know, the things that make you strong. Like, it's much harder to forge your way in the world being honest, not being dishonest, not tricking people and using people and taking advantage of people, right? If you do that, it will change you. It will change who you are. It can't help but change who you are, right? Whatever gets channeled through you, whatever comes into you or channels through you, will affect you, right? The conduit is affected by what it transfers, right? If wires, you know, transfer electricity for a long enough time, and there's enough resistance, what happens to those wires? Those wires eventually lose their electrons, right? I mean, if you know anything about electronics, right? What happens over time? Wires eventually have to be replaced because they lose their electrons. There's some change happening. You don't necessarily understand it or see it, but it's happening underneath. And so the same thing happens to you, right? I found that there's just a principle, just a law of Mother Nature in life, that what you do and what you say will influence who you are, right? I mean, you know, if you're biblical, or even if not, I think Jesus had a pretty good statement when he said that it's not what goes into a man that defileth the man, but what comes out of his mouth. And that's true. What comes out of him, right? What you exercise, what you practice, what you do will corrupt you more than what comes in. Not that what comes in is important to take hold of, but what I'm saying is that if you act in a dishonest way, right? If you're violating these laws, these principles, it's not a punishment thing. It's not a vengeful thing, at least in my mind. It's just a law, just like gravity, right? And you're going to suffer the consequences, but it'll warp you in the process. Like, you can't hold on to high values, right? And do things that countermand them, right? So if you, and this is where you know, here, I'll tie it all together here, is essentially it comes down to this. You have these principles, okay? These are the principles that you operate by, right? Your integrity, right? Your life, the things that I would say are universal principles, but whatever principles that you hold dearly, that you're holding to, right? That define who you are. And this is why you live. This is why you do what you do. This is why you put in a full effort, why you put in a 9, why you work so hard, why you give it your best, why you even would want to do good things in the world, right? Is because you hold a certain set of principles, okay? If you hold those principles, but then you take actions which undermine those principles, right? Which say, I don't hold those principles, okay? Even if those actions you take will advance you in some way, give you some kind of a shortcut, you know, somehow contribute to what you think is your end goal, because you're acting in such a way that undermines those principles that you have, it's going to undermine in your head the value of those principles, right? You can't say, you can't say that you know, that you hate alcohol and you think that all alcohol is bad, right? I mean, this is a kind of ridiculous one, but you can't say that and then go and drink every night. If you did that, you would be undermining that principle. You see what I'm saying? Pretty soon you wouldn't believe what you're saying, right? You can't continue to believe what you're saying if your actions are doing something different, right? You can't say that you are, you know, whatever it is. Some people call themselves things, right? And they say that they believe in justice, or they believe in fair. Let's say they believe in fair and being fair and treating everyone humanely and right? Because there's a lot of people that say that. And then what do? They get on Facebook and they're like, fuck this guy, fuck you, I can't believe you're a friggin' bigot, I can't believe that you voted for Trump, or whatever, you know, whatever they say, right? I mean, and on the other side too, I'm not gonna take sides on this, but you see what I'm saying? And they act like a fucking maniac, like a twisted maniac, and totally are willing to kill someone else and assassinate their character just because they have a different belief, but they're upholding this principle of being someone who is for the rights, to defend the weak, to, right, all these things, whatever principles they have, but they're undermining them by their actions. They're being dishonest, and because of that, the whole thing is going to collapse. The whole thing is going to fall, because they can't hold those principles and then be acting not in accordance to them, and have their mind actually believe, their self believe what they're projecting, what they're saying that they believe. And so they sort of spiral down this bitter toilet bowl of destruction and doom, and pretty soon they become this, you know, shriveled up person who's just bitter at the world, right? This is what happens, okay? So that's a kind of a long-winded answer for that question, but all in all, I gotta say, I agree. If you're dishonest, if you're violating your own sense of principles in the world, it will change you, because it has to change you, because you are what you do. Well, you are what you repeatedly do, right? As I think that's misattributed to Aristotle, but it's true, right? You are what you repeatedly do. So if you do something, that's what you are, and that's a principle that you subscribe to. You can't subscribe to a principle and not act in accordance with it, otherwise pretty soon you will lose whatever semblance that you had of the person that exemplified that principle. There you go. All right, if you like this video, make sure you click the subscribe button below, click the bell so you don't miss any videos. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.